You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hey, patrons, how are you? And I'm sitting here with Bob, as always.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, Bob, and we also have Bill in the peanut gallery over there. How you doing over there, Bill?
Just fine, Matt.
That's our studio audience.
Yeah, our studio audience. He likes to sit in. There's a question at the end from Bill. But anyway, today we sat down with Brian P. Luskey. Now, you might remember that last name, Luskey. Ashley Whitehead Luskey, his wife, and also the assistant director of the Civil War Institute, was on the show many moons ago. And Brian's book, which she had told us about then, was in the process of being completed, and it is now complete from the University of North Carolina Press. And it's called Men is Cheap, Exposing the Frauds of Free Labor in Civil War America. I thought that, full disclosure, Bob and I got this book 4 or 5 days ago, a couple days ago. So we didn't have the time to read the whole thing. So I said to Brian, what would I read? If I don't have the time, what do I read? And he said, Introduction and Chapter 4. So I told Bob, and Bob read Introduction and Chapter 1 and the conclusion.
That's because you were reading Chapter 4, and I figured we have 2 chapters covered this way. That's not a bad idea.
Anyway, so we did that, and this is very interesting to me because I say this a lot with various other things, and it's true. I never really cared about anything that took place off the battlefield. Okay? Always more interested in the armies and the battles, and within that, more from the high command's perspective, not the boots on the ground perspective. I find regular people to be typically boring, so that's why I never really was into that stuff. But I'm gaining an appreciation for that stuff as I get older, and like the town history here in Gettysburg and things like that. And so, Men is Cheap it's talking about free labor in the Civil War. Free labor, not a lot of us think of slavery when we hear the term free labor. I know I did, but that's not what he's talking about there. We get into that in the interview. And this is actually really interesting. I can't wait to actually finish the book in order and learn more about this side of things. And I don't know. I recommend it if you can get your hands on it. And actually, I know how you can get your hands on it. Do you know how they can get their hands on it, Bob?
I bet it has something to do with Addressing Gettysburg.
Of course it does. You go to addressinggettysburg.com/books, and there it is. It's called Men is Cheap, Exposing the Frauds of Free Labor in Civil War America. Bob, do you want to add anything?
Well, just like when Ashley was here, and there was renewed interest then, great interest in the Killed at Gettysburg website. I think if you listen to this, and then you'll be interested in looking at the book. I know I had my eyes opened about Vanity Fair, and there's some illustrations in there from.
You're talking the magazine, Vanity Fair.
Magazine, and the whole concept is very interesting. One that I had never really given much thought of before. That is those people in between the people who are looking to hire substitutes, for example, once the first draft was passed. And how do you get a substitute?
Right.
If you don't know what it is out, how do you get one? So these middlemen, these brokers are
You know what I meant to ask him about the substitutes is what was like a typical experience for a substitute? Because I know in the Ken Burns, which, by the way, Netflix doesn't have Ken Burns again, which this drives me nuts. Every once in a while, it's off. And then I have to tweet them and say, get Ken Burns back, please. And then they do, because they listen to my opinion. But in the Ken Burns thing, I think it's George Templeton Strong talks about how he hired himself a substitute. And so I've always wondered, okay, so you hire yourself a substitute. He says to the guy, anything you need, let me know, and I'll make sure that you have it, and, all that stuff. But what was it like for a substitute? And, like, what kind of a crappy situation did you have to be in beforehand to go in someone else's stead and possibly die? Like, what a sad life that must have been. I don't know. So anyway, let me just read you this one little review here. Brian P. Luskey has written a highly original and extremely compelling account of how the Civil War, a war fought for freedom, ultimately undermined and narrowed what freedom meant in the United States. A beautifully crafted, closely argued work. And from what I've read of it, I agree with that assessment. And without any further ado, I give you our conversation with Brian P. Luskey. already in progress.
That's right.
Okay. So, Brian, what made you want to write this book?
So in 2010, I gave a paper about intelligence offices, and that paper was the product of a number of years of and work with a number of historians about studying underground and secondary markets and institutions that facilitated market activity that we may not conceive of as part of the mainstream economy, but which were actually vital to how the economy worked.
Maybe what it was an intelligence office. What is that?
An intelligence office is a labor agency.
Okay, so like a temp agency.
Yeah, and it's a place for workers and employers to come together to make a contract, a bargain for labor. Typically, domestic servants and household mistresses would be negotiating with a labor broker who was the proprietor of an intelligence office in cities. And this institution certainly was really important for in an anonymous labor market for workers to find work and for employers to find workers. And so it was an absolutely necessary institution. Mm-hmm. But the broker often was understood to cheat both employers and workers.
Okay.
They might take a fee from workers who paid that fee thinking they were going to get a job out of it, and the broker might not be able to do so. The broker could say, well, that's the state of the market at this time. Workers might be sent to an employer who had also paid a fee, and they may be disappointed with the workers they got. And the broker was to blame. And so in this way, this is a way for contemporaries to make distinctions between what they considered legitimate and illegitimate market behavior. But as an institution that facilitated the workings of the wage labor economy as a system, what the intelligence office keeper does for employers is to help them distinguish the ways in which they're operating by their own self-interest from the nefarious deeds of the broker, and to say what that broker is doing is bad, but me taking advantage of vulnerable populations of workers, Irish immigrants among them, that what the employers are doing isn't as bad.
Is it kind of like in the South where those lousy slave traders, but you need those slave traders if you're a white slave owner? I mean,
precisely.
Yeah.
It's blame the middleman.
Right.
is the story here. These are absolutely necessary figures, but deeply hated ones.
You know what it reminds me of is I spent some time trying to get into show business, like video production, things like that. And I remember one time going to a talent agency, and they're like, oh, yeah, you know, you can get your work. We got people on Law and Order and this and that and the other thing. And oh, great. Okay. So you need to just get headshots. And I knew that ahead of time, so I brought them with me. I had a friend take pictures, and they're like, oh, no. We got to get more professional looking headshots. We have a guy who's like $600. So $600 for the headshots, and then this amount of money to be, you know, to be represented by us and everything like that. Yeah. And I was like, and I already knew ahead of time because I have a friend who is in the business, and he goes, never go to an agent who says you have to pay for him to get you work.
There you go.
And of course, people that do go, I don't know how those are legal today, in this day and age, because I mean, they must get enough people work, but like it's just shady, you know, because you shouldn't have to pay to get work.
Man, I thought you were going to say as soon as they saw the picture, the headshot of you, they said, no, you got to get a more professional head.
They said you should just get into podcasting.
So here we are.
Yeah, that's how we got here. What is the Enrollment Act of 1863?
The Enrollment Act of 1863 was passed in March of that year in an effort by the U.S. Congress to pass a draft whereby and they set up different classes of the male population to decide who would be drafted first, with an effort to fill Union armies which were depleted by unsuccessful and costly, in human and financial terms, military campaigns previously in the war. It included a commutation clause or fee that allowed drafted men to pay $300 to the government to absolve themselves from this call to service, or they could hire a substitute to serve in their place.
So $300, and what was the average rate for hiring a substitute? What would you have to do to hire a substitute?
So this was, in fact, why the commutation fee was important, and President Lincoln wrote a memorandum that he never published, but in defense of the commutation clause, he said if there hadn't been a commutation clause, then there wouldn't be any ceiling to the amount you might have to pay for a substitute. So what the commutation clause did was to keep substitute rates under $300. You wouldn't pay you wouldn't pay to hire a substitute if they cost more than the commutation fee is the idea. But opponents of the commutation clause, of course, said this is very clearly evidence of a rich man's war and a poor man's fight, and that lots of people did not have $300 sitting around.
What was the average income back then for people?
It depended on your occupation. It's I can throw some figures out there.
Sure,
so if you were a day laborer working on the wharves and docks of New York City, you might make $1 a day, but that work is seasonal work. You're not working every day all year long, so you might work 250 days a year in a good year. So that's $250 a year. A dry goods clerk working in a store might make between $500 and $600 a year. So you're talking a sizable chunk of money,
right?
$300.
How about a farmer? What would they?
Well, it depends how big your farm was. I guess, again, I hedge on all of these questions. If you're a farm laborer, you might make, in some rural New York counties, $12 to $13 a month, which is should ring a bell. That's
soldier,
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
With the
you don't get your food and your clothes,
right.
or shot at.
Yes. So there is, I talk about this a little bit with some of the characters in my book, that they may have made that calculation as how much am I making now as a farm laborer, and I might also get a ration along with being a soldier. So that might seem like a good idea. There's a soldier named Charlie Bowen who joins up in the regulars and is in New York City, and he tells his wife in a letter home that he had met a guy who'd become friendly with another soldier who had been a clerk making $600 a year, and he said to his wife, why I don't understand why he's here.
Right.
So that does point obviously to the ideological motivations of the war as also being important as economic ones.
Brian, you mentioned before a rich man's war, a poor man's fight. Can you talk about that phrase? Does it capture any truth, or does it mislead? A little of both?
It's certainly been an important way historians have talked about the demographic makeup of armies. Mm-hmm. So there is an important recent book by William Marvel called Lincoln's Mercenaries, which argues that in fact, yes, it was a rich man's war and a poor man's fight, and he did great research in the census and in muster rules to show how there were a lot of impoverished men in industrial districts of the North who did sign up because of economic motivations. I think though, that it's a question that may never be answered because...
Hello, Getty's Nerds. It's Matt, and I hope you enjoyed that preview of our premium content that can now be found over at patreon.com. I just want to let you know that Addressing Gettysburg will always have free content for you to listen to in the forms of our narrative episodes like Antietam to Chancellorsville and the upcoming episode entitled Invasion, June 1863, appendix episodes, and our wildly popular Ask a Gettysburg Guide episodes. But episodes like Antietam to Chancellorsville take months to produce, as things are now. I hear from people almost every day asking how long until the next episode is finished. And the answer is, when I have the time, I can do it. Your support at Patreon can cut down the time it takes to produce an episode by months. Maybe you don't care about that. Maybe the Ask a Gettysburg Guide episodes are what you like, but they leave you wanting to learn more. Well, fear not. More is what Patreon is all about. Patrons receive access to new premium episodes each week. These episodes are straight interviews or discussions with licensed battlefield guides, rangers, local historians, academics, authors, public historians, people from the Gettysburg community who do impressive things, and frankly, just about anyone who can talk on a subject related to Gettysburg. I want to make sure that the interest you already have in Gettysburg is enriched with our premium content. Your support means the world to me, because that means it will be easier to produce content that will bring Gettysburg to more people and, hopefully, more people to Gettysburg. And the podcast episodes are just the beginning. So please go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. That's patreon.com/addressinggettysburg and become a patron. I thank you in advance.